Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lugo's Journey podcast. Today, I have on an incredible guest with me. His name is Kirk Westwood, and he is the author of the book, The Very Best Bad Idea. And I want him to introduce himself and tell me how amazing this book was because I read it and I absolutely loved it.
I wrote The Very Best Bad Idea. It's more or less about how everyone you love has been lying to you your entire life, and every time you've been told that that's bad idea, you come up to your mom and you're 6 years old, you're like, I'm going to do this, and she's like, whoa, terrible idea. No, that was a brilliant idea. It wasn't possible, but it was still brilliant. And then you get into high school or you get into elementary school and you're like, Mrs. Krabappel, I'm going to do this thing. She's like, whoa, Nick, terrible idea. And no, it wasn't. It was a brilliant idea. It wasn't going to work, but that didn't make it a bad idea. And we've been forced through years and years and years, and we get to adulthood, young adulthood, old adulthood, and we start to do it to our children where they start to be like, hey, bad idea. No, it's not. It's a great idea. We need to reframe what good ideas and bad ideas are and why we think they are good ideas and bad ideas, because in that framing, we've actually stopped ourselves from reaching a lot of the potential we wanted to meet, and we've kind of railroaded our heads, put ourselves in a track system that's really hard to break free of until you realize you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So to basically put that entire thing in a summary, because that was great, and the whole thing is, right, your book's about how in our lives, our creativity has been squashed. It
Yes.
really has, like throughout our entire life. And not only is that done through our education system and also just cultural norms and societal norms, but the thing is, it has a profound effect on how we actually solve problems in the real life, right?
Really?
The whole thing is that our entire life, we've been told to solve problems. We've never been told to look after problems. So
Right.
really take me through, right, how, first of all, how that affected you as a child and
Sure.
how you were raised in that education system. And then also what is the basic problem that's going on?
Awesome. So, and I've put a fair amount of thought into this, and I want your listeners to prove me wrong on this, and I'm dead serious. Hit me up online, prove me wrong on this, but NASA and space exploration is the only example that I can think of that this isn't true about. True, honest to goodness, like, holy crap, space, the final frontier is the single example that is free of this. We have been through our lives. We've been given tutorialized sets. We sit down and we're like, okay, kids, this is division. Here's how you do it. This, and you do this, and it was taught to us in steps. And it was rigidized. That's not a word. Rigidly, we were held to it so much that we had to show our work. And if we got the right answer the wrong way, it was still wrong. And if we got the right answer, if we got a right answer our own way or different, or we didn't need to do it that way, it's wrong. You were
literally creativity. Yeah.
No creativity. And I really mean this in math. Pythagoras was a pretty creative dude to have come up with the Pythagorean theorem. He saw systems in a new way. And this man created a system, the Pythagorean theorem, 2,000 years before, BCE. 2,000. So we're 4,000 and change years later, and we're still using the system. Now, is that because it's the best system? I honestly don't know. I'm not a math guy. But we get these systems that work, and we stop. And they're like, well, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. And that's just simply not true. There's lots of points in reinventing the wheel. The wheel itself has been reinvented. So to answer the second part of your question of I don't think about things like other kids. I never did. And so my whole life, I'd come into my teacher and it's like, well, what if we did it this way? And they're like, Kirk, just sit down. That's just not the way it works. And I'm like, why? It would work. They're like, well, sure, it would work, but this way works better. I'm like, I see that it works, but better, define better. Why does it work better? They're like, well, because this is the way that everyone knows. I'm like, okay, so I guess there's some efficiencies there. I get, but it didn't stop. And it didn't stop. And finally, I was literally almost in my 30s. I actually think I was in my young 30s when I suddenly realized that I had never in my life been taught to solve a problem. And when I approached something that I didn't know the answer, I went and researched to find who knew the answer. And when I found that no one knew the answer, I was like, oh, it must not be possible, which is manic. It's dumb. It's ridiculous, because the real answer is, if you come upon something that you don't know how to do, problem solving before looking for the answer, problem solving so that you understand the complexities of the issue, is a much healthier and a foundational way of understanding than just, it's the reason they won't let you use a calculator in elementary school, because you need to memorize the steps. But what if you didn't memorize the steps? What if you learned new ways to think about the problem? Which is why now we're learning how like Asian kids do multiplication problems with the lines. Have you seen this?
I've seen it before, yeah.
And we weren't given that option. We were just told that we had this multiplication table that you had to memorize. And so it's the American school system. We do not teach problem solving at all. We teach tutorialized sets, and to reach this kind of math answer, you get it this way. And it's very limiting to cerebral and cognitive development.
I still remember I was in calculus in high school, and I had the same thing. I was doing some sort of creative way to try to solve the problem, because my whole life I have a terrible memory, and I was really trying to figure out, like, okay, you know what? How am I supposed to memorize these steps, right? And that's what they want you to do. They want you to memorize the steps and just be able to take each problem and essentially do the same thing, right? There's no creative element to it. So I started trying to do the creative way, started trying to go around it. And my teacher walks up to me. She's like walking around trying to check ants. And she goes, "Nick, I see what you're doing. Stop." She's like, "Stop. I've seen kids try to go in here and do the creative element, and I don't want to see it. It just doesn't work. Go and follow my method." And when she said that, I literally, like, I didn't say anything, because, like, of course I'm polite, but in my head I was like, did that really happen, right? Like, are they really trying to drown that creative element? And you're right. I've seen it throughout my whole life, right? Like, whenever we're approached with a problem, well, first of all, we're always approached with a problem. We're never approached with a way to solve the problem, right? And I think that's the crux of the issue.
Absolutely. We come in, and this is all things. This is art. This is gym. There is no subject where they don't present you the solution either simultaneously or sometimes one step before I honestly remember them teaching me the Pythagorean theorem and then saying, now let me show you where this would apply. Like, they show you the solution first in a lot of circumstances. And when it's not first, it's simultaneously. I was in my master's degree before I was ever given a paper and said, tell me what the problem is. Not tell me how to fix it. Tell me what the problem is, which is a very different question.
Yeah.
And then tell me your proposed solutions. And so I'd look at this thing, and I remember some of my colleagues going, all of us, classmates, sitting and getting the same paragraph, reading it. And the most amazing thing was some people literally said, I don't see a problem here. And other people, I saw, problem A, and in a room full of 25 people, there was probably 5 distinct issues found. And now, were some of us right and some of us wrong? Yes. And depending on various factors. But I was literally in my master's program before anyone told me what's the problem, not solve the problem. And same thing in art. If in my book I have the example, I'm pretty sure it's in my book. Yeah. I have the example of, even in art, we spend time teaching people how Van Gogh's brushstrokes worked and what his paint was made of and how he painted. And then we teach people his methods and we test on his methods. When instead what we could do is teach them what Impressionism was, why Impressionism was, the antithesis, like why it came about, and then say, okay, everyone, paints are over there, brushes over there, be impressionistic. And when someone comes up 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later with something that looks like a finger painting, okay, we know that didn't work. Let's move on to, because only in understanding the problem, true understanding, not being aware of the problem, but only in truly like grasping it, are we ever going to be able to truly deep down solve it. And that comes from failure. That comes from understanding the edges. And, with our math and our sciences and our physicses, that's not a word, we don't teach them that. We teach the known world and the known equations. And it's not until we hit the real world that we realize, oh crap, nothing I learned in school is relevant, because none of those problems come cute and neat and clean like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem in it all, right? Like, every single time that you're doing something, you're told, you know what? your teacher, right? It's sort of like a two-way problem, right? Your teacher, it would be so much less effort if they went and told you how to do it and then you did it yourself, right? Like if they gave you the formulaic like way of doing it and then you did the formulaic way of doing it with the examples, because they wouldn't have to keep going and people would be making less mistakes.
Sure.
And then from a student perspective, then at the same time, the students would be making less mistakes if you give them the formulaic answer. So
Right.
while it sort of dulls the creative element of it, people are getting more answers right. Teachers don't have to worry about it. Students are getting less frustrated.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you think about this, so are you familiar with Six Sigma? Like if you think about this in a Six Sigma sense,
What's Six Sigma?
it's a business organizational paradigm. Let me put it this way then. If you are trying to create an assembly line, and I'm not trying to do that whole factory assembled students thing, I'm just happen to be. If you look at this from that standpoint, if the idea is to get a mass amount of children to a set numerical, set quantifiable thing, all I've got to get them to do is the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, 2 plus 2, solve for X, and that's it. And if I can, dude, stop being creative. Just say the ABCs, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, crank out the Pythagorean theorem. Here's your diploma. Now go fail elsewhere. And that is a 100% more efficient, air quotes for those who aren't watching, that is a 100% more efficient way of doing it, but it's not more effective. It's more efficient. And those are different words. Like it is a way of getting more people through to a set. It is a problem of the problem. It gets a huge number of people through a tutorialized set to a set answer. It doesn't get anyone to critical thinking skills. It doesn't get anyone through actual solving the problem because the system itself doesn't allow for solving problems. The system itself is a tutorialized set. Grades run through 12. Federally, there's federal standards. Each grade has to do certain things. And so everything in it is teaching the test. Everything in it is teaching the end result. None of them are teaching understanding the problem because in a lot of ways, it is the problem. Like
yeah, exactly.
Itself.
And I think that's the big, like the overarching problem at the same time, right? Like if you have people that really aren't really getting taught how to think, right? Like I guess they're teaching them how to think a little bit, but not in the way that we would assume, right? Not, in the critical thinking problem solving manners that we want. I think it would be a better system, going off of what we have now. I agree, just, sort of like the ABCs and then send them to trade school, right? Like that's sort of the way it was before. And
apprentices system started at 12. Like, yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And then you have sort of the same solution.
Well, and so, I mean, I used to, it's a long story, but I used to have a kind of a part-time thing as a volunteer at the Smithsonian's. And one weekend I was kind of asked to come and lead this like, it's probably 40 3rd through 5th graders through the Air and Space Museum. And I led them through as I'd gone through 1,000 times. I was raised in the DC area. I've been through there so many times I could do it backwards and blindfolded and still know where I was. And I get them all the way through it. And I ended it kind of over in this one gallery. And there's this stand-up cardboard cutout of this dude. And he's wearing a full leather like parka and a hat, and like because he was in the days of aviation before there was any insulation in these planes. They were big steel tubes up like in the atmosphere, so they were sub-zero cold. And this guy, he's in the in the Air and Space Museum in the Smithsonian, and this beautiful picture of him full size, and framed next to him is a reproduction of a letter written to him, a letter of censure from the United Postal Service saying, we heard that you were stunting again. We heard that you were doing this again. We heard you were doing this again. If you do not stop, you will be fired, blah, 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 blah. And then it says underneath that he would then die in an air stunt a few years later, but he would break this record and that record and this record throughout his life. And I always ended it with kids saying this, and their parents would always just give me the most looks of shock and just disbelief that I had said this. I was like, guys, look at this guy. He beat this record. He beat this record. He has his picture and his name for all his children and grandchildren up in the Air and Space Museum. He is immortalized. Could you please point at me the person who got Employee of the Month? Could you please point at me the guy who got, most obedient, who was the most on time, please point at me anywhere in this museum. Point at me at one person that is in this museum, from the Rushman cosmonauts to Neil Armstrong, to point at one person who got here by obeying the rules. Trick, there isn't one. That's not how you don't solve problems by following the rules, because the rules were never set to have you solve problems. The rules were set to have you avoid becoming a problem. And there's some value in that. There's some value in not being a problem and not,
It's decreasing risk, yeah.
It's decreasing risk, but it's not it's not innovation. It's not pushing anything forward. It's actually holding accidents back. And I don't mind accidents that much.
Wow, they must have hated you there at this.
Oh gosh, the parents looked at me like I was the devil. They're like, dude, you just told my 9-year-old ADHD boy that that rules were what was keeping him from being great. I'm like, yes, I did, but for the record, I wasn't, wrong.
Yeah, and then also the parents probably sitting there like, I just got employee of the month. Exactly. The gold watch. Like, man, I got the gold watch. I was here for 20 years. I was there every day. I did all this different stuff. It's like, right, man, and that is awesome. And if that's your accomplishment, I do not want to look down at the person who was like, I was the best cog, because you know what? Cogs are important. They really are. They truly are, and that is truly not a consolation prize. A lot of my book talks about how cogs need creativity too. You can do some amazing things in your happy, healthy middle management job that will make you more productive and more happy by just releasing that creative inside of you a little bit. This isn't only for entrepreneurs and people that want to, break records. It is for everyone. But we've been told so many times that our ideas are bad. We've believed them. And really, our ideas are our individual perspective and our way to see through the woods that other people don't. Yeah, I do want to go into, because now you're starting to get into like your creativity strategy, and I really do like it. When I say strategy, obviously there's no strategy, but there's ways to unleash it, and you call it the Kraken. So I want you to.
It's the creative, yeah. Yep. So the Kraken is my absolute favorite mythological creature because, it's kind of not mythological. I grew up knowing about the Kraken. Oh yeah, it's this giant octopus that can swallow cities. 1982 Clash of the Titans, release the Kraken. Yeah. And then the 2011 remake that was awful, but that's not the point. But we found one in 2007, and then we found another one a bigger one in 2012, and we have found pieces in the stomach of blue whales. We have found pieces of suckers that, if the ratio is correct, these things were hundreds of feet long, which is multiples of times bigger than we ever thought. We thought squids and octopus were, up to 12, 18 feet long were the biggest ones. But it turns out we have 30 and 40 foot ones that we've found. And there's, like I said, there's evidence from pieces of suckers inside of blue whales that if the ratio is correct, these things were 120, 130 feet long. That's insane. Yeah. Biologists say that we've actually discovered less than a third of the species on our planet. Now, yes, a huge amount of those might be microscopic, single cell, tiny microbes and things like that. But we know more about space, significantly more. We know significantly more about space and the solar system than we know what's at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We know more about what's on Mars than we know what's on Earth. And that's insane. Right now, we're spending billions of dollars to get to Mars, and we're spending no money that I know of to find out what's at the bottom of the sea. And that's interesting. I mean, just from a goals standpoint,
Yeah, I mean, also from a mythological perspective, it's like, why would anyone want to go into the bottom of the sea where you could find a Kraken? Imagine that. Right.
And so, everyone, they're in you're familiar with the anglerfish? They were in Finding Nemo. So I've been aware of the anglerfish, kind of my whole life. You learn about it in elementary school. And in Finding Nemo, it kind of supports that they're about the size of a football. No, they're not. They're the size of a VW bug. They're huge.
Wow.
Going into the bottoms of the sea is just terrifying. It's where nightmares live. But the point still remains that we were so sure we knew. I mean, maybe not the scientific community, but humans as a whole, we're like, oh, we're comfortable with, this is cold, this is hot, that's water, it's wet, this is dry, this is, let's go into the stars. And we don't know what's in ourselves, speaking as the planet.
Mm.
And while we had set foot on the moon before we knew that the giant squid talked about in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea wasn't mythological. Like, Jules Verne was talking about the giant squid, and everyone's like, well, yes, but that was science fiction. And we had a golf course on the moon before we realized that Jules Verne didn't make it up. And that's interesting. So
I think that's a great analogy. It's a great analogy for, the earth as a metaphor for yourself, right? So, I mean,
right.
We don't know a third of ourselves, and therefore we can't unleash the creative out of us, right? Like, there's no way that we could do that.
And so everyone, just like my NASA analogy, everyone's like, I'm going to go explore bold new worlds. I'm going to go crush this. I'm going to go that. Dude, you have discovered less than 1/3 of yourself. Like,
yeah,
you should probably harness that. Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying ignore the bold new worlds. I'm saying that unleash that part of you that you're holding back, and that's going to get you there.
So what do you find is the best way to do it? I think a big part of it was making friends with the mouse, right? Like, that was a huge part of it.
So that was actually the original title of this book was Release the Creative. That was the title of the book when I pitched it to my publisher. I was like, Release the Creative, and they're like, yeah, okay, you'll probably change that title. Like, no, I won't. It's sacred. Release the Creative is my mantra. And then Make Friends with the Mouse was the new title. Was the second title before it ended on The Very Best Bad Idea. I love turns of phrase, and I love idioms, and I love, because I think they tell us a lot about our culture. I think we can learn so much from turns of phrase and idioms, and I could fill up 3 of your podcast episodes just talking about the weird etymology of things we say and why we say them. I won't. I'm just saying that I love them.
Trust me, you did a lot of that in the book, and I found
it
very
I do. I rip
interesting.
them apart. I love it. And I don't mean always to be negative. Some of them I love from a very positive stance. But I think you can learn a lot about people of where we get these phrases. But Make Friends with the Mouse is a joke. Literally, it's a joke off of Build a Better Mousetrap, because building a better mousetrap is a stupid goal. It doesn't actually say, it doesn't tell us anything. It says, hey, if you ever watch Shark Tank, they're like, yeah, we get out there and build a better mousetrap. And build a better mousetrap than what? Like, build, language is programming. So when you say build, that is that has a meaning in your brain, and it usually 99% of the times means to take diverse pieces and construct and put them together. Better means better than the previous in this case, I guess. Mousetrap, something that traps mice. Okay, so are you trying to collect them? Do you want to collect a lot of them? Are you trying to attract mice? Is the goal to have a dozen mice at the end? No, it's actually a true mousetrap. The whole concept of a mousetrap was a mouse deterrent. But in that there's bait on a mousetrap, it is by definition against its own goal. It's trying to kill the mouse so you can get rid of it, but shouldn't the goal actually be find a better mouse deterrent, not build a better mouse trap? And while we're at mice, why not just have it be all rodents? Why not have it be... And so just in the phrase, build a better mousetrap, we set out subconsciously with this goal. I need to construct a thing that will trap mice. That doesn't go anywhere near achieving the objective of a mousetrap. It limits it to, how can I catch a mouse better? If we were being honest, we don't want to catch mice. We don't want there to be mice in the first place. And so I joke in the book, I was like, what if you could, make a mouse fence? What if you could make a mouse hotel? What if you could ask the nice mouse nicely to not chew on your food? Like, what if you fed the mouse, could you pay protection fees to the mouse? And so it would leave you alone. What if you just made friends with the mouse? Because by looking bigger, by solving the actual problem, because build a better mousetrap isn't solving the problem. It's giving you no details. It's giving you a tutorialized set, build better mousetrap. It's giving you a tutorialized set that doesn't even address the actual problem. So the first thing I say to people is you need to figure out what the problem is, not the solution. People come into me at work and they're like, hey, I want you to do X for me. I'm like, why would we do that? And they're like, well, I heard online it'll really help, or I heard here it'll really help. And it's like, okay, stop, let's back up.
Yeah.
Let's look and figure out, is the problem that we want to catch mice, or is the problem that we want to make friends with them? Or is like, what's the point here?
Yeah, and how are we going to be able to sort of think outside of the realm of our normal thinking, right?
Right.
I think that's a really big testament to, you know, I don't know if we've laid out a good strategy for how to do, but at the same time, like just putting yourself in that mindset of like, you know what? Like, how are we going to stop looking at the formulaic solutions that have already been made, and let's start to look at the problems that they were trying to solve originally.
Right.
And that's sort of what we're going for.
Well, and the way that I found it, you know, and when is step one is take a step in any direction.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. Like, it super doesn't matter. The only thing that separates you from your goals is distance, period. 100% of the time. The only thing that well, no, money. Nope, it's distance. It's only distance. It's only ever distance. The only thing that separates you from your goals is distance. So step one is take a step. If the thing you want gets smaller, cool. You went the wrong way. Turn around and let's go back.
Yeah.
By understanding orientation, we can move mountains. We can understand by just the simple measures of figuring out what the goal is and moving towards it patiently and slowly, we'll get there. One of the things that drives me up the wall that we see in corporate America all the time is someone has an idea and they come in and they say, hey, I have this idea. It's brilliant. It'll do this. 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 And they say to their boss, let's do it. And the boss goes, well, yeah, I like the idea. Definitely has merit, but there's no money for it this year. Let's put that on next year.
Yeah.
That logic is so flawed that it drives me crazy. First off, ideas don't cost anything. Ideas are free. And so the way that I like to put it is, if I right now have a beautiful home that I love, but it has no garage. And it has a dirt lot next to it though. And if I said to someone, I want by next year to have a really nice car that I'm going to park in, that I'll need to park inside. They're like, well, you can't have a nice car because you don't have a garage. It's like, okay. So I go and I get a broom and I sweep out the dirt lot and make it as clear as possible. Well, that cost me an hour. It's still not good for a Porsche or a Tesla, but it's clearer. And I was like, well, now I go and a penny a time, go buy single cinder blocks at a time, and I draw out, kind of lay out. And as I go and build the structure, and by the time I need real money, I have a foundation. I have found lots of problems. I've had a chance to redesign the problems. By taking steps in the right direction. Well, I don't have money for it. Yeah. I don't have money for a Porsche right now. And I don't even have a garage. I don't even have nowhere to put it. And so if I go to someone and say, can I have money for a Porsche right now? They'd be like, where would you even park it? It's like, cool. That one I can't solve yet either, but I can solve the problem before the problem before the problem. And lots of times I've found as you're walking through them, you can start skipping steps because they weren't really necessary. Or you could do two at one. So now a year later, when the money might be there, instead of going back to my boss and saying, hey, Steve, can I have the Porsche money this year? And he's like, nah, maybe next year. Now the next year you come up and you're like, Steve, I'd like the Porsche money, but check this out. I've swept out but I've used little bits of time and I've already outlined it with cinder blocks. There's already a thing. I already have proposals for what this will cost, this will cost, so this will cost. I've actually found out we can do it for a little bit cheaper, or it might even be a little bit more. But now instead of just asking, you are now prepared for the thing. You've done it without the money. You've done it without, and by doing it theoretically, by doing it on paper, by doing it you've prepared both the plan and yourself and the team to see the problem the same way. Because Steve, this theoretical manager, had the same problem as everyone else. When you brought him the let's buy a Porsche plan, he didn't write it off because there was no money. He wrote it off because he didn't understand it. He might have liked the idea, but he didn't understand what you saw. If you do the creative thing, if you build the garage, if you figure out a way to lay out the pieces so that when you come to him the second time, or hopefully before you went to him the first time, and lay out what you've got, even if he still says no, you still now have a garage for a Mazda Miata, if not a Porsche. Like, you still have set groundwork for a solution that just waiting till the money is right will literally never solve. It's the dumbest thing we can be doing. Well, let's wait till we have the money. You don't need the money. You have the resources you need.
Yeah, exactly. And it puts you ahead, right? If you're taking some steps, any steps towards your goal, then you know what? You're going to get, closer to where you're going
Closer.
to be. I
Yeah.
actually noticed that during this quarantine. So during the quarantine, I have a philosophy that there are two types of people. There are the people that get after it and really just, do something, just anything, right? And then there are the people that just fall apart,
Right.
right? So I was talking to my friends that really fell apart, and I just told them, I go, this one friend, I go, just do something. Just do something. Like, what do you think you want to do? He's like, I've been thinking about getting into this. I've been thinking about getting into this. I go, just do one of them. And he started doing it, and then, he started running with it. And that's sort of what it ends up happening. It's like, you don't really need the resources. You don't really need anything. You have the creative power inside of you. You just gotta start, and you're gonna end up running with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, step one to any goal you have, step one is take a step in any direction. Like, well, I don't even know how to start. Cool. That's the best place to start. Because
Yeah.
if you knew where to start, you would instantly go into this tutorialized set. You would instantly go into this, okay, step one is I've got to download this application. No, step one is take a step in any direction. And then step two, reorient yourself because something just happened with the first step. And then step three, just keep going. Like, and that sounds overly simple. What my brother-in-law, when he heard I wrote the book, he's like, I'm not really interested in these 5 steps to a perfect life. I'm like, I promise it's not 5 steps. It's only 3 and they make no sense. So you don't even have to worry about it. Like, this book doesn't pretend to be like, here's the silver bullet to solutions. No, step 1, take a step. Step 2, reorient yourself. Step 3, keep walking.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's just a general creative process. If you,
right.
That's the ironic part about it, right? If you did create like a formulaic path, this is how you be creative, then you're taking away the creative in it.
The thing is, it wouldn't work. Like, it was 2 or 3 years ago. I still laugh about this to this day. 2 or 3 years ago, I got this woman who was trying to sell me a system, and I'm on a sales call with her and she's like, I have a proven system of disruption that has worked for over 25 years. And I just sat back and I thought about that. And I was like, the ego that statement takes. A proven system of disruption that has worked for over 25 years. You understand that, like, once you disrupt something once, like, it immediately solves for it. Like, you can't disrupt. And like, you could say, well, e-commerce really disrupted a lot of things, right? But not over 25 years. It was over like 8 years. Like, it was disruptive for a period. There's no system that is universally disruptive for over 2 decades, because that's not how creativity works. So yes, I could absolutely potentially write some algorithm of creativity that would work like twice, and then by definition be self-destructive.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big problem, right? I think, if we take both of the things that you've really been pushing for, right? Like, these 2 things, it's like, start to think for problems yourself and start to look at the problem instead of the solution. And then at the same time, if you start to look at it and just start taking steps that way, you just start to really do it, then you can put them together, and that's the system for disruption, if there is any system.
Right. The number of times I've made a boardroom stop, like pens dropped, dead silence, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, is with the simplest question that makes me giggle myself to sleep every time it happens. Is some CEO, CMO, some board member will say, we have to find the solution. And I'll raise my hand. I'll say, cool. What's the problem? And they'll say, we've been talking about it for 20 minutes, Kirk. And it's like, right. I know the situation we're discussing. What's the problem? And they're like, sales are down. Well, that's not a problem. That's a result. What's the problem? And they're like, well, we've got to get sales up. Like, no, that's our desired goal. What's the problem? And the thing is that they have absolutely no idea. They know that sales are down. That's not a problem. That is a result of a problem.
Yeah.
They don't know what's making. Is it that there was a news report about our food being poisonous and so people stopped buying it? Okay, now that's a problem. But sales being down is not a problem. That's a result. Sales being up isn't a goal. It's a result. People get so solution-based that they stop way before the problem. There's this one system called the 5 Whys that I go into a little bit in the book, but there's books written about it, and it's way better done by people other than me. But, you go into someone, you're like, the nursing staff needs more money. Cool. Why? Well, because we don't have enough. Okay, why? Well, because the board of directors keeps spending it on all of this other stuff, and Okay, so why do we need more nurses? Like, and you get down to it, and by the time you get to the fifth why, you realize that the problem wasn't money. Almost never is. The problem is this completely other thing.
That
We are
nobody ever paid attention to. Yeah.
we are so tutorialized. We're like, oh, 2 + 2 is 2 + 2 is 2. Oh, I've got to find the solution. I've got to find the solution. And you go back and you're like, cool. What's the problem? And the number of times I've brought a boardroom to silence because they had no idea what the problem, and they admitted they didn't know what the problem was. They knew there was a result they were trying to undo, or they knew that they knew they needed a solution to this situation, but they didn't know what the problem was.
Yeah, and I think that's the part of I would say that's a big, I guess that's a fundamental flaw, but that's like an ego problem within us all, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's so amazing to get that feeling of, oh, I figured out what the problem is, or at least, I'm working towards a solution, right? But it doesn't feel good to be absolutely lost,
Right.
right? Like nobody hits that feeling. And that's why you have that boardroom silence, because that's the feeling of being absolutely dumbfounded, lost, and you don't know where you're going.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I never mean to be taking people's wind out of people's sails, but they're like, we've got to fix X, Y, and Z. I was like, cool. And so I'm in the military. I used to, the number of times I've gone in, had some general say, we've got to fix this problem. It's like, okay, cool. So what's the problem? They're like, we have too many DUIs, each weekend. I was like, oh, that is a problem. How many did we have? We had 2 this weekend. Sir, there are 20,000 soldiers on this base. Yeah. 2 out of 20,000 is not a problem. That is a gift. 2 out of 20,000, 19 to 30-year-old young men. That's statistically that's abnormal. That's abnormal in the right direction.
Yeah.
You're never going to have 0. 2 DWIs is congratulations, sir. And they hate that answer, but it's the truth. We have to get rid of this stat. We have to get rid of it. Well, let's look at that. Is 1 in a million actually a problem? No, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to advocate for drunk driving. I'm just saying that at some point, people like to pick their problems where there isn't one, or they paint something as a problem so that they can solve it, or they make something a problem so that they can have a stump speech, when really they are approaching a tutorialized set. I was told this is a negative result. I need to get rid of the negative result. They were never told to assess a situation. It's just not.
I think that's a really tough thing, right? So I mean, I think the biggest problem, and I think this is so characteristic, is that after people take the first step, even if you do take the first step, what happens if you take it in the wrong direction, right?
Oh yeah, then people panic. I've wasted so much time. I've wasted so much space. You walked 1 foot in the wrong way, man. Turn around.
Yeah.
It's and mistakes are wonderful. Mistakes. I go into the book a lot about cognition, and I won't get too far into that now because it just takes too long to explain. But as I said, kind of at the top, your brain has no mechanism by which to attach disassociated information. If I started rambling at you deep cognitive concepts with parts of the brain you'd never heard of, and I was, your brain has absolutely no mechanism for retaining disassociated information. The minute there's a burnt hand or a cut or a lost limb, no, it's no longer disassociated. Now it has a very nice place to stick to. I'm not saying go out and get your leg cut off, but I'm saying mistakes breed architecture, and architecture now allows for lessons to stick. The worst teacher in the world is success. It teaches you literally nothing because there's no architecture. You're like, hey, this one time I went to Vegas, I put a quarter in this machine, I pulled the lever and I won $10 million. So I know what we're going to do for our budget problem. We're all going to go to Vegas with a quarter. We're all going to put it in, and that's going to solve it. No. That is a fallacy. You got lucky. You got successful. You have no idea how you got successful. So stop trying to tutorialize your success to other people's problems that are disrelated. And that is what everyone online right now is doing with their 3-step systems. They are not selling solutions. They are selling, I pulled an arm in Vegas and I won a bunch of money. Let me show you how. You're like, right. That's adorable.
Yeah. I think that's so. There was this quote by Bill Gates that I really liked. He goes, "Success is a lousy. Success is the worst thing for young people because they teach young people that they can't lose, right?
Right.
And it's that same mindset. But then you look at someone like Andrew Carnegie, and Carnegie was just just this was in Think and Grow Rich, right? By what is it? Napoleon Hill, right?
Yeah.
In Think and Grow Rich, Andrew Carnegie, he was interviewed and he goes, if you took away all of my assets, if the government just told me, Andrew, you are poor now, you're officially $0 in your balance sheet, he says, give me 4 years and I'll be back to where I was.
Yep.
And that's
Gary
how it
Vee did
is.
something sort of similar recently. Like, if I had to start over tomorrow, what would I do? And he's like, it would take me. He said it wouldn't take him nearly as long the second time because he
Exactly.
failed a lot, and failure teaches you a lot.
Well, I think that's the biggest problem in our society in general. And this also has to go down to school, right? It's like we're taught, first of all, in my family, like I have the same thing, right? Like whenever someone's wrong, like they hound on me, right? Like whenever I'm wrong, they hound on me. And that's the same thing with my friend group, right? I feel like it's sort of a societal thing.
Oh, it's
And it's
very.
also it's the same thing in school, right? If you make a mistake, it's like people definitely get on you, right? And I
Right.
think that's a big, if you're taught to never be wrong, you're to always, think always think before you speak or things like that, then you will never get the very best bad idea. You will never have the first bad idea that leads to another bad idea that might lead to one that is the very best bad idea. And that is a problem.
So while writing this book, Mark Randolph's book came out, That'll Never Work. That he was the co-founder and CEO of Netflix, the first CEO and co-founder. And the first 8 chapters are about how he had a 45-minute commute every morning with his business partner. And every single morning he would get in and go, okay, here's the idea. Customizable shampoo. And he's like, no, Mark. He's like, no, let me get through it. And the next day, okay, customizable dog kibble. He's like, Mark, stop it. And I'm dead serious. Those are both real ideas. Customizable shampoo and customizable dog kibble. Kibble.com is Mark Randolph's personal webpage to this day.
That's fine.
It is. It really is. And every single day he got in and would pitch a different idea that he thought of, and every single day. And finally it was like, okay, wait for it. Movie rental by mail. And they're like, VHSs break too easy. They're too this, having an inventory would be XYZ, won't ever work. And then DVDs were coming out in 6 months. And so they started talking about it. And it was literally because even though they were laughable ideas, these two men spent 45 minutes trying to make absurd things work every day. Every single day. Okay, customizable dog kibble. Okay, that's terrible, but let's make it work. And they'd spend 45 minutes as a thought experiment making it work and then realize it wasn't going to. But because these two men, neither of them shot it down. No, stop. They didn't kill it. They let the idea bloom and blossom and let it die on its own. You and I talked before the show and last week about how we're both film lovers. Baz Luhrmann, when I was in my film school, Baz Luhrmann was one of my absolute idols, and he did Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge, Australia. He did some stuff on La Boheme on Broadway. He's done some amazing things, but I think he said this the very best when he said, he has 100 ideas a day. He has 100 ideas a day of what it would be so fun to do. And he says, and here's what I do. I spend an hour just kind of letting it rattle around in my brain. And if it's still there after an hour, I give it 20 minutes. And I think about it for 20 minutes. And at the end of that 20 minutes, I ask myself a single question. Am I willing to wake up at 6 a.m. every single day for the next 4 years at the chance of this not happening? And he said, and 99% of the time, the answer is no. And okay, cool. Then it wasn't that it was a bad idea. It's just that it wasn't an idea I was willing to invest in. And Mark Randolph, every single morning, they would invest 45 minutes of this ride of coming up with these insane ideas until they found one that had teeth. And that's what the book is about, The Very Best Bad Idea, which, for the record, I sent to Mark Randolph and told him how amazing his book was. And his review of my book is my favorite thing that's ever been said about me by anyone, to include my mom. His review of my book is I still glow about it because my email pinged one day and I opened it. I was like, holy crap, how much do I owe this guy? Because It was a glowing review. It was saying that if he had, it's a pretty long quote, but he says, if he'd had my book on his nightstand when he was starting Netflix, he would have slept better at night, knowing that it's okay to have a bad idea. That everywhere he went with Netflix, everywhere, every investor, everywhere, everyone said that'll never work. That's why the book's called That'll Never Work. And he lost sleep about it. He was like, no, but it will work. It will work. I'll make it work. And he's like, yeah, ideas are bad. Most ideas are bad, but that's okay. And this book makes you realize that's okay and that you should run with them. And that's the goal.
No, I do like it. I think there was so much, that's another thing when it comes to entrepreneurs. It's like entrepreneurs, everyone, like whenever I got into my entrepreneurship hubs, like everyone tells me, it's like ideas are cheap. Ideas are so cheap because, first of all the ideas that you have, I bet you 99% of them, as you said, are absolutely awful, right? And they will never work. But then there's the one that you have to put in so much time, so much persistence. And most people aren't going to think it's going to work because that's how new ideas are. Nobody wants to deviate from the system. But
right.
At the same time, for that one idea, you have to be passionate about it. It has to be a good idea, and it has to really be able to resonate with some people. And then once you can sort of get that, you have to you have to have that amount of persistence to be able to get it to work. And that's the thing that sucks about being a creative person. It's like you have to get all three of those together, and it's incredible.
And it is, and that's what makes good ideas so amazing, is that, like, because good ideas are cheap. Good ideas are forgettable. Good ideas are like, oh, that's a good idea, Johnson, let's do that. And then 10 minutes later, we're on to something else. It's the bad ideas that take development and germinating and work to make them fit. Those are the brilliant ones. The ones that other people don't get. The ones that aren't obvious. The bad ideas are where the future lies. Because if you'd have said to Orville and Wilbur Wright, hey, guys, I'm glad we just got that in the air for 300 meters. Let's go to the moon next. They'd be like, no. But we would do it in under 60 years, which is insane when you think about it. Like, we made it from a hilltop in North Carolina to the moon in 6 decades.
Yeah, my friend's writing a book this year about moonshot companies, right? Like how to make a company that's literally, nobody has any idea that it's going to work, but it ends up being a freaking moonshot. And he said, he did a lot of research into JFK's speech in 1960 saying that we were going to get to the moon. And 50% of the American population believed that there was zero chance that it was going to work. I think it was 110 out of 113 scientists believed that there was no way that the Apollo missions were going to work. And
That's
they
awesome.
did it within a decade.
And I mean, it's so amazing. And that's why I was saying earlier, like, NASA is truly the only thing where if you've seen the movie The Martian, or read the book, but it's so cool because the author of the book went to all these NASA scientists and all of these people and said, look, I know it hasn't happened, but I don't want to write fiction. I mean, it's fiction, but like, I want this to be as correct as possible. And I've had many, my brother is a PhD MD. I have many, many PhD friends that I'm the stupid one amongst my group. And I've talked to them and they all say, yeah, there's a few things that are obviously a little bit fanciful, but the brilliance of that show is how not ridiculous it is. And the reason I bring that up is that that's truly the only frontier of pure problem solving that I know of like, Apollo missions, the Apollo 11, Apollo 13, he calls up and he says, okay, we have this problem to solve and this bucket of junk to solve it with. And no, we can't get them other resources. We have this problem, and that is pure problem solving. Yeah. Tony Mendez, who was he was the Ben Affleck character in Argo. His autobiography, The Real Man, Tony Mendez, is called Master of Disguise. It's one of my absolute favorite books ever written. And he talks about how, so I guess this would change my NASA statement. It's NASA and the CIA. But he talks about how nothing makes you solve a problem more than knowing if you don't, you're going to die. Like, There's no
That's true.
there's no timeout. There's no, but I need something else. There's no, let me requisition more funding. Nothing makes you solve a problem more than knowing that these are your options and they all end in death except this one. Like, and that's problem solving. And that seems to be the only thing that gets people to get out of their tutorialized set and look at the problem. How do we solve the problem?
I think it's a little difficult because, I know a bunch of, people that work on Wall Street, and especially the IT people, right? The people that work on IT, I find it to be the funniest thing, because on Wall Street, it is life or death. You have that sort of life or death mentality when it's not actually life or death.
Sure.
Like, people have associated money with life.
Oh no, yeah.
So
you
much.
Have 7 zeros in a you have 7 to 8 to 9 zeros in a number. It's life or death. Like,
Exactly, right? So actually, what I find so interesting is that throughout the years, we've developed this, tremendous system of having these, new fast computers, and the systems that actually run most of these databases that people are trading on are mainframes, which were created in the 1960s, 1970s.
Yeah.
Still haven't been updated, still are using the same things, and people don't want to be able to make that association, right? That creative shift, moving from the mainframes to the, there's, what's it called? Blockchain, right? Like, blockchain's like a big thing, and it's like, it's going to take over, but it took how many years? It took 20, 30 years for people to stop saying, you know what, I want to stop using these mainframes. They're not as nice.
Right.
And it's a big problem, because when you have that survival instinct, people will be able to go, okay, you know what, maybe let's innovate out of this problem. But then you're also going to have the people to say, you know what, survival instinct, let's just bear down, live for the short term, and not look for anything creative in this,
Absolutely.
In the long term.
And I talk a lot about this in the book, of that I think that Bill Gates is one of the most undercredited innovators of our time. People go, what are you talking about undercredited? He's Bill Gates. Everyone knows who Bill Gates is. And then I'll go, cool, what did he do? And they'll be like, he invented Microsoft and he programmed Windows. I was like, that's cute. He did neither of those things. Like, he didn't. What Bill Gates was brilliant, and Steve Jobs in the exact same breath. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, both so undercredited. And people look at me like I'm insane. They're amazingly credited, but they're given credit for things they did not do and given no credit for the things that they actually did. And my favorite story, this is in the book, but it talks about with Bill Gates, is he's over in Europe talking in the 1990s, talking to a boardroom full of bankers for the largest banking system in all of Europe. And so you have to imagine these guys lived through the Second World War. I mean, if this is the 90s and they are in their 60s, they have been around. They've been around and they've done amazing things. And he's coming in saying, I want you guys to do away with this entire system and let me wire this place for computers. And they're saying, look, we're not saying that we don't believe computers are coming. We're just saying it's not how we know how to do it. We're old, we're old German men, old French men, and really, how important is this? And he's like, do you believe it's coming? Yes. Do you believe it's necessary? Yes. Do you believe that within 5 years, X, Y, and Z? Yes. Then why would you spend 1 penny on yesterday when you know that tomorrow is coming?
Yeah. And he had that whole goal, right? His goal was to put one PC on
in
every
home.
single household. And how long did it take him to do it? Like, he was the one who did it, and it worked.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, doing it within 10 years, starting an entire technological innovation,
it was the second Renaissance. It was the wild west from 1990 to 2005 of suddenly everyone had a computer, then everyone had the internet, then everyone had e-commerce, then from 1990 to 2005 was the second Renaissance, the dot-com revolution, and that was way more Bill Gates and Steve Jobs than people think, than people tend to realize. They didn't invent the computer. They didn't invent much. They had engineers doing most of it. They made people think about what a computer could do differently. They made people look at the world differently.
Yeah,
they saw the problem. Awesome. They saw the problem, not the tutorialized set, because Bill Gates even said that, no one was ever going to need a computer bigger than X, Y, or Z size, because in that current paradigm, it wasn't going to be necessary. But he's since explained what he meant. But my point being that no one in the old tutorialized set needed a computer because it wasn't part of the solution that we'd been trained for. The reason Bill Gates and Steve Jobs got so astronomically famous wasn't that they invented anything. They stole all of it. They got famous, and they got what they need credit for is that they changed how the world, not America, the world thought. And that's insane.
Yeah. And so I do think, first of all, you made a great point there, in your book, saying that the best people, first of all, made new ideas and also were amazing communicators, right? Like the people who communicate the ideas, because the people who create the ideas but then don't communicate the idea are forgotten.
Or totally forgotten.
Totally forgotten. So it's only the people who actually, you think about it, right? All the people who are sort of at the top of the, like the world's richest list, right? The most famous people right now. And also you brought up a lot of the famous historical figures. They were the people who not only, maybe created the idea, but you look at like Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, they sold their ideas. And
Richard Branson's another one on that list that I always love to add to that list. Richard Branson's one of my favorite crazy people. The CEO of all the Virgin stuff, Virgin Airlines, Virgin Cruise Lines, Virgin, all that. I mean, yeah, all those people you just mentioned, the Bezos, the Buffett, what they did was they saw the problem when everyone else saw the steps.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Okay, so there's one more thing that I really wanted to talk about in creativity, and I found this to be absolutely fascinating because it actually changed the way I thought about creativity.
Cool.
You said that creativity, and somebody introduced this to you, is, quote, intentionally misaligned memories.
Yes, Dr. Carmen Simon.
Yes, explain that to me.
So I was in my grad program, and her book, Impossible to Ignore. So even further back, my company's slogan is "Don't be ignored." Like Glass River Media, don't be ignored. That was our slogan. And so I'm in my grad school, and they say, "Hey, you all should read this book by this woman, Dr. Carmen Simon. It's called Impossible to Ignore." I'm like, that sounds like a book I'm gonna like.
Yeah.
So I not only bought the hardcover, I also bought the Audible, and I swam through it. I dove through it. I devoured this book, both visually, auditory. I devoured it, and I loved it. It spoke to me in a lot of ways, and it's specifically about cognition, the neuroscience of memory. Okay. And so when I got writing my book, I was like, well, clearly I have to talk to this woman. So I called her, and she agreed to a 30-minute interview. And I gave her my whole spiel that I said almost verbatim in this interview on don't make friends with the mouse, about building a better mousetrap. And I was like, so what if we made a mouse fence? What if we made a supersonic frequency? What if we did this? What if we did that? And she said, okay, Kirk, let me ask you a question. Are you as creative as the strength of your memories? And I stopped. I was like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, are you as creative as the strength of your memories? And that took me aback. And I'm like, nope, third time. I don't know what that means. And she's like, nothing. You didn't create anything right there. I'm like, none of those things exist. She's like, right, but you know what a fence is. You've seen a fence. You know what a dog whistle is, and that it agitates or rallies dogs. You know what a UN diplomatic accord. You know what a friend is. All you just did in your creativity there was list off memories, things you understood, and other things you understood, and just slammed them together. Hamburger ice cream. Which is a terrible idea, hamburger ice cream, but that's all, mouse fence. I didn't create anything. That is a misaligned memory. That is I understand fences. I understand what they do. I understand my understanding of the problem. Keep mouse out, mouse fence. No, that won't work for these reasons. Mouse frequency, which I also stole. And so she started explaining that creativity without fail is 100% of the time taking a memory, an understanding, an observation, a bit of data from column A and a bit of data from column B, and realizing that you could click them together and that they worked.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things to show this is, one, incremental innovation. If you realize that every invention was built on the back of a previous invention, like all of them, And so go back all the way to primal, go to living, 1800s, pre-industrial revolution, 1700s, pre the industrial revolution, when everything was like a primal invention. We had, bricks, but bricks are just homemade rocks. And we understood rocks because we'd seen rocks. So figuring out a way to make one, well, that was simple. We just straw and mud and rock. And, water, everything you can think of, everything was in some way, all the way to glass. Everything was an incremental innovation from a thing before it that we could observe. We could make houses out of, teepees, which became this. Everything we had was an incremental innovation from the thing before it. And when we start talking like primal inventions, the wheel is the only single one that is not found in nature. Nothing in nature rolls. Now you're like, well, a rock rolls down a hill. Right, but nothing travels by the use of wheels. Nothing, and what's even funner, not a word, what's even more interesting about that is that the wheel was not built for transportation. The wheel was built as a pottery wheel, and they say the first is that it was a plate that was manually spun as they made the pot, and the actual invention wasn't the wheel, but was the axle that allowed them to spin it around a fixed point. And 400 years of potter's wheels, we have documented history, 400 years of potter's wheels, before someone was like, wait a minute, we could turn that on its side and roll. We were super deep into recorded history before we had the wheel, because it is not something we've observed, which goes to demonstrate Carmen Simon's point, Dr. Carmen Simon's point of all innovations come from taking something we understand from over here and taking something we understand from over here and clicking them together. My mouse fence wasn't an innovation. It was just me misaligning two memories. I've forgotten their name. The two guys that invented Google. I could have told you their name an hour ago, but yeah, it's going to drive me crazy. Anyway, the two guys that invented Google, I'm not saying they didn't do anything amazing, but all they really did was build a system that looked up things based on likelihood. That's amazing. And it's a new way of thinking. They deserve Sergey Brin, and Sergey Brin's the other one. I don't remember the first one.
Starts with an L.
Yeah, it's going to drive me crazy. But their innovation wasn't like, they didn't think of something that had never been thought of before. They're like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could look up things based on likelihood? That should be possible. Let's do that. They didn't come up with anything that was unheard of or crazy. They just thought of a new way of approaching the problem. Yahoo was indexing the internet, and Google was like, no, let's do this by likelihood of searching, and let's base it off of the like Dewey Decimal System, because it was a book searching tool. Yeah. It's misaligned memories. It's taking tools that do various things and smacking them together, and that's creativity. So the way to be creative is to collect as much data from as far as wide and to constantly be trying to break it. Like, how can I make these two things that were never meant to go together? How can I make them fit?
Yeah, and I think, that's part of what the very best bad ideas, and coming up with all these bad ideas. It's like most of the time you're going to get the hamburger ice cream. Every time you're going to get the hamburger.
And you know what? It's a terrible idea, but you know what? If someone came to me and said, Kirk, as my friend, please try my hamburger ice cream, I'd try it. I'd probably hate it. But hamburger ice cream is a terrible idea. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
And that's probably how all recipes were created, honestly.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
let's see if we take this garlic and put it with butter. See what we get.
That sounds delicious. But if you think about the absurdity of some recipes, like coffee, it's like, I bet if we take that cherry over there off that tree and then roast it, then grind it, then strain hot water through it, then add copious amounts of cream and sugar, it probably wouldn't taste bad. Like, how many steps did it take you to get there?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I can't imagine. You think of like a plane, right? You're right. Most of the things that we do are also found in nature, right? So you have something like a plane. It's a bird, right? It's bird wings. And we don't really need the laws of...
Yeah, a submarine. We see fish. We understood the concept of going underwater. All of these inventions, until you start getting into the true computer algorithmic, that's where they become incremental. But if you look at the just true, a car, it's a wagon. A wagon, everything came from something before it, and everything new came from an observation in nature,
Yeah,
except
that's
the wheels.
true. No, I do like it. I think that's such a. You ever seen of course you've seen The Lion King, right? Like that's what the circle of life is, right? Like the whole part of the purpose of the circle of life is that we are not we ourselves are not enough, right? Like it requires human progress. It requires, it starts the movie with the birth of Simba, and then it ends the movie with the birth of the next king, because
Right.
that's always how it is. You have
Yeah.
the incremental innovation, incremental growth of the species, and that's how we push forward. I think that's incredible. It's such an incredible idea.
Yeah. No, it's primal. And the thing is that it all comes from taking a step forward and not being afraid of standing out. Because the other part that we haven't talked about, and I'm not trying to bring it up, but necessarily, but like the other part is that the reason this happens, and this is threaded throughout the entire book, is that we are terrified as a people to stand out and look stupid. We are so
Yeah.
terrified of it. And evolutionarily, that makes sense. But it kind of doesn't modernly. Like, no one's going to cast you out into the cold. You're not going to starve to death because the tribe kicked you out.
And the thing is, we're so connected nowadays that it's like, now that you have 2,000 people that you can connect with instead of the 20 in your group, if you become the outcast of that small group, it's like, all right, whatever, move on to the next one.
No, I mean, and just take civil rights, for example, like the whole it gets better thing. When I was a kid before the internet, so I am not gay, but I was in theater and I liked to sing. So no one believed me on that. And the internet didn't really exist yet. And there was no gay kids that I knew of in my school, elementary and middle and the first half of high school. But like I could imagine, and I was tormented for being different, for liking to sing, for being in theater, for being gay. Again, not gay. Wouldn't matter if I was, but like I was beat up for it. I was tormented for it. But nowadays, and it used to be that I would have graduated high school, let's say in 1980. And if I didn't move to a community, if I didn't find my people, if I didn't go somewhere, there was a real chance that I'd live my entire life scared and alone and hiding. But nowadays with the internet, like, dude, women's rights, black rights, gay rights, civil rights, the internet has allowed for communities. You're not going to be there. You're going to find your tribe. You're going to find your people. And the internet and the smallness of the world is allowing for us to get our bad ideas out now. And if you get shunned by a group because they don't like your ideas, that's fine. Your people are there, and now you can find them.
And now that's the thing, right? So now the person that you are, right? Like the inner person that allows you to stand out in a small group that is not the person that you want to be. Let me clarify that, because that was a little worded weird.
You know what you meant, but yeah.
So let's say you're in some group that you don't want to be in, and the biological part of you is saying, you know what, conform, right? Become part of that group. But at the same time, all you have to do is be the person that you are, and you're going to find people that are in that other group. And that's it. Like, that's all you need to know, because if you do that, you'll be able to be the person that you are and find people that will support you in that endeavor, which is amazing.
Right. I mean, you will find the support you're looking for, and your community is out there, and it's the coolest time to be allowed to be wrong, because for the first time in almost human history, I can go out and say, you know what, shun me all you want. My people are here. I'll find them. I just have to yell loud enough. I have to get my ideas out there, and I will find them. And whereas 20 years ago, that wasn't the trick case. 50 years ago, it certainly wasn't the case. And 100 years ago, no, if you didn't follow the village, but you were in trouble.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I mean, you might get some cyberbullying, you might get some stuff, but we've reached a time where the ability to find our people, be it racial, gender, whatever it is, idea, finding your psychological sames, your similars, is very easy. So there's never been a better time than to be yourself, because yourself has people now. Yeah. It always did, but you can find them now.
So do you find that as a creative person, as someone who wrote an entire book on creativity and also has a chapter inside of that book that I really liked. Let me see if I can find it.
Only one? Sorry.
You are who your friends are.
You are who your friends are. Yeah.
So as someone who says that, explain what that means. Why is it so important to unleash your creative with people who are also creative?
Dr. Denise Gosnell, I met her through writing this book, actually, and she's just brilliant. And she introduced me to the concept of graph data, which I had never heard before because the minute I graduated high school, shunned all math because I'm dyscalculia. I have dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia but for numbers. I don't do numbers well. I'm very, very not mathy. So Dr. Denise Gosnell, she introduced me to graph data, and graph data, when you think of it in your brain, you think like a line graph or a bar chart or a pie graph. It doesn't look like that. It looks a little bit more like a brainstorm thing. It's this circle to this circle to this circle. It's
like a network.
It's like a network, exactly. And what we started finding is if we started clumping people not by behavior, which has been the way to do it forever, but if you dump them, if you pair them by relationship, and if you treated each relationship group as a organism as opposed to so to use an example, let's take cell phone churn. Cell phone churn is a big problem for the big networks, the AT&T, the T-Mobile, the Verizon. Their whole business model is keeping you at AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, whatever, for multiples of years. That's their entire business model. Keep you dependent on that addiction of phone. And so what they started finding is for years, they were trying to do behavior data. How many people paid their bill? How many people paid their bill on time? How many people paid their bill faithfully? How many people were late often? And they tried to figure out who they could service based on individual behaviors. And they found that they couldn't, that the churn was about the same. And they could pin down certain behaviors that meant that someone might change their cell phone bill or cell phone program, but that mostly individual behaviors were very erratic. Some people would be super good and then leave. Some people would late pay all the time. And then there was no true through line. But then they started doing relationship data. And what they started finding is, as what Dr. Denise Gosnell said, you are who your friends are, which means if you're on an AT&T Samsung device and your phone calls people that are on a Verizon iPhone, and the top 10 numbers in your phone, if network to network, you are on a Samsung, on an AT&T, and the top 10 people you call are all iPhones on AT&T, that person is going to change statistically. I mean, again, we had an employee here that was the person on a Google Pixel, person on a Google Pixel, and we're all iPhones. And she's like, not me, not doing it. And obviously there will be outliers, but what they could never pin down with individual behavior, they were able to pin down very, very quickly with relationship data. If two people got married and joined on a family plan, obviously they would go to one or the other. That individual behaviors did not predict change or churn, but relationship behaviors did. If two people in a friend group changed from AT&T to T-Mobile over the next 6 to 8 months, many of them would. Wow. Because that, like pods of whales or dolphins, people move in an electronic space as a pack.
Yeah, well, it's true everywhere too. I think it was so cool. They had a study that came out in the New York Times, and it's become a pretty popular study ever since then, which has absolutely dumbfounded me. Because when I looked at the study, I was like, wow, if your mutual close friend, that's how they defined it. So somewhat like a best friend became obese, you are 171% more likely to be obese.
Exactly. That's relationship data. That's graph data. Yeah. It's because now, I mean, and I will tell you, I'm a little heavy right now, and I have always felt heavy. I've always felt out of shape. I was really heavy in film school. I was really heavy first year out of film school. And then 1 year out of film school, I got a job in LA, and I moved to LA where it's LA. Yeah. And I will straight up tell you that, and again, it wasn't, I mean, I guess it was ego. I guess it was, but all of a sudden I lost 75 pounds. I got in super good shape. I started running avidly. And it was because now when I got to set, me being the Pillsbury Doughboy at 250 pounds plus around guys that were like, yeah, part-time models, and everyone, even the behind the scenes guys, were way better looking and way more trim and slim. And LA really is this, it just gets to you. It just gets inside your brain, and people, even me, don't want to be outliers. We don't want to stand out in a negative way. So I lost 70 pounds. I've
Yeah,
gained.
exactly. Like you conformed, but you conformed in a good way. So
I
it's like
conformed
is
in a
that
good way
a thing?
because, and the thing is that I left LA and I gained about 20 pounds back. And then I left Orlando where I moved to. And then I moved back to the DC area where everyone's just a fat politician. And I haven't gotten back up to 250, but I'm very much back to kind of my pudgy self because, as you just said, I moved to where it wasn't as an identity crisis place. And so that even you are who your friends are, you are who your environment is. Graph data and relationship data is actually really, really fascinating.
Wow. I think that's the toughest thing. I think we'll end on this because this is like, this is so important. What is your suggestion for people who have friends that are not who they wish to be and they want to be who their friends are, but at the same time they don't want to give up their friends? What is sort of like the
When you say
formulaic?
they would want to be who their friends are, but they don't want to give up their, I don't know that I understand.
So they don't want to be who their friends are, but at the
Ah,
same time they don't want to be heartless and be like, goodbye friend, like we're not friends anymore.
so I mean, let's put it, assuming we're not talking for any like moralistic reasons, like, but I don't want to be a drug dealer or like a drug mule. As long as we assume that we're not talking anything like truly moralistic lifestyle issues, um, it's a tough question. It's a tough question. Part of you is if they're truly your friends, they'll support you. If like if you go to your friends and say, hey, I am X, Y, and Z, but I really want to be a filmmaker. I really want to be a poet. I really want to be an astronaut. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And even though, friends will support you. And if they won't, then were they the friends you wanted to keep? Like that in the world we live in today, like we were saying, relationships are largely self-selecting.
Yeah.
And if you are releasing your creative and you are attacking the things you want to become, and that leads to shunning around the tribal circle by the tribe you have, you do have to make a decision of, is your goal worth the warmth of that fire, or is finding your real tribe worth it? In my opinion, in my experience, the guy who's been beat up 3 times a week for his entire young life, and the warmth of the wrong fire has never, ever been appealing to me. Like I have absolutely no desire to spend time around the wrong fire. That sounds miserable. Like, oh man, this will be warm and fun. I just have to keep my mouth shut. Oh my gosh, miserable. But I know people that are like, hey, as long as I'm around the fire. And if that's your answer, then that's your answer. But I'd say find that thing, that part of you that, like I said, you only know that Mariana Trench, that part of you, that Kraken deep down that is there. And if releasing that empowers you around the fire, awesome. If it separates you from the fire, you have a decision to make. But I can't imagine wanting to get warm around the wrong group.
That's even worse. Yeah.
That's worse because now you know who you are and you know you're not them.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm sort of like I sort of agree, but at the same time, there's a lot of emotions that are at play. So it's
Absolutely.
it's tough.
It's a tough call. It's always a tough call, but it's like you've held it up a couple times. Like it's the very best bad idea, and the whole idea is just that figure out who you are and why that matters, and are you where you want to be, and are you being as creative as you want to be, and are you fulfilling? And it's not a self-help book in the like self-actualize sort of way, but it's just right now, everything we've ever been taught in school by our parents, everything we've been taught was sort of wrong. It was. We were told that we had to do, our education was based on a tutorial, not based on problem solving. Our parents told us, our parents were teaching us things to keep us alive, not to have us succeed. And they're like, not my parents. They did everything for me to succeed. And that is sometimes true and sometimes not. It depends. But really, at whatever age you are, 18 to 80, you got to take a look and realize you've been taught the solutions. Go to school, get a job, go to school. Like, is that the tutorialized set to the solution you want? My dad, for the first 10 years out of college, is like, well, you need to get a job with a good 401k and a retirement plan and just, buy a house. And it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds miserable.
Yeah.
I don't want the baby boom life. I mean, don't get me wrong, I own a house and I have a 401k, but like I didn't do it by getting a job and starting at the bottom and working my way up. I did it in an entirely different way because I solved the problem of me, not the solution of society.
I agree. No, I think that's awesome. So I was going to ask you to give a little, why should people buy your book? I think you gave a little bit, but I
Yeah,
do want a direct, give me 30 seconds, quick. Why should people buy The Very Best Bad Idea by Kirk Westwood?
I've never met a human being, truly, and I've lived everywhere in the world. I've never met a human being that didn't feel in some way squelched or suppressed. That after 30 seconds of talking to them about the right subject was like, yeah, if I could throw it all away, I would do X. If I could do this, I would do Y. Like, who didn't feel some part of them being wasted or suppressed. And maybe that's righteous and maybe it's not. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's not. But The Very Best Bad Idea, the entire purpose of the entire year of writing it was about disentangling why you're doing what you're doing, why you're making the sacrifices you're making, and if there is and how to achieve your best self by just releasing that part of you that you don't like talking about.
I love it. I love it. All right, Kirk Westwood, it was amazing having you on. By the
This
way,
is
for
fun.
anyone who wants to get in touch with him, I will have the links in the description with everything. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much.